Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Great. We're going to get started in about a moment. Just let everyone connect to audio. All right. All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's Alumni Career Chat on Moving Up in CUNY. My name is Samantha Bruno. I am the Assistant Director of Graduate Career Services here at the Marxe School. I'm here with my colleague, Suzanne Grossman, on the call. And today we are very excited to have two HEA alums who have progressed their careers throughout CUNY. I'm here with Ivan Lee and Wynter Greene-Allen. I'm going to have them introduce themselves and their titles and how they've got the positions. So thank you all for joining us today. I'll be monitoring the chat as we go along. And we'll open it up for questions towards at the end of the session here today. So yes, Wynter, could you kick us off? Tell us about yourself.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending part of your lunch with us this afternoon. As Samantha mentioned, my name is Wynter Greene-Allen. I'm currently the Associate Director of the Honors Program at Baruch. So I haven't gone too far, or rather I've come back to Baruch where it all started. You asked me to talk a little bit more, or do you want to wait for those questions to
start?
Oh,
yeah, just give an introduction to you, your title. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll leave it there.
Yeah, great. And then Ivan.
Thanks, Sam, and happy to be here to talk to, fellow alums and at Baruch. And Ivan Scott Lee. I'm currently the academic program director for Accelerate, Complete, and Engage, also known as the ACE program at Queen's College. Pretty brand new program at Queen's College. We only launched last semester, fall of 2022. So pretty young, growing program at Queen's College, although ACE has been around in the CUNY system since 2015. And we are a sibling program of CUNY ASAP, which has been around in the CUNY system since 2007. Previous to my current role at Queen's College, I was the founding academic program director for CUNY ASAP at the College of Staten Island. I was back there in 2015 until 2022, September. So I was there for about 7 years and a half, where I built, launched, expanded the program at CSI with ASAP, and then just right before I left CSI, ACE was also added to College of Staten Island. So ACE was actually also added to my portfolio as I was about to depart at CSI. Prior to CSI, I was back at Queen's College. I was the associate director for transfer and transition program. So I led transfer advising for the college at Queen's College, and also managed the advising component of various different special groups, such as Early College Initiative, sophomore initiatives, and juniors and seniors initiatives as well. So happy to be here talking to folks about our experiences in CUNY as students and as higher education administrator.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So yeah, I guess we'll get started with, could you tell us both how you started at CUNY? So I'm talking about your first, exposure to CUNY, whether it was a student, as an administrator, and how did your experiences, as you've gone through these different roles, how did they complement each other as across the different campuses that you've been at? So.
Wonderful. I can start with that. I realized I gave my title, but did not give my CUNY verse history. So I can start off there. So I'm currently at Baruch. I've been here since October of 2019. So I started right before the pandemic started. Before that, I was advising students that are part of the Macaulay Honors Program. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware of that or familiar with it, but I can definitely talk to that as well. So I worked with students at Queen's College, advising them. I also worked with students in the honors program at Lehman College, also as an advisor. I was the coordinator of the academic affairs department at Macaulay as well. So I've been at Macaulay for about 13-ish years. I also spent some time working with high school and middle school students in the talent search program, which is a TRIO grant funded program at John Jay. And I also spent some time working in the School of Education at Hunter College. So I've been in 3 different boroughs. between Queens, the Bronx, and Manhattan, through a range of different schools. And I love that experience. I like the idea of being able to learn from different places. Oftentimes, when you're in one place too long, you kind of either get stuck, or it's sometimes difficult to reimagine or revisit how things have been done, just because they've been done the same way for a long time. So being able to have experiences on different campuses with different teams, different colleagues, different offices. Um, I look at that as a benefit to be able to see how to continually improve, and how to also reach back to colleagues on other places and use that for help where I am now. So to go back to Sam's question about my first experience with CUNY, I my first experience with CUNY was after I graduated from college. I am a first generation student, so I was a member of the Upward Bound program. Not sure if folks are familiar with that program, but that program was at Queens College. So everything comes full circle, as Ivan is at Queens right now. And so that was the first college campus I'd ever visited. And so when I was looking for a job after I graduated, I knew I wanted to work with students, and I just wasn't sure exactly in what capacity. I think a lot of folks that are in this space have either had really great experiences with folks helping them through different things, or they haven't, and then they want to be that for other students. So I was looking for a position. I found something at John Jay working with middle school and high school students as a counselor. I looked at the description, and it was partly terrifying. It was recruiting. It was going into high schools. So if you can imagine going into public high schools with students who have their teachers to listen to, but you're an outside person coming in to tell them about this great opportunity. Interesting. So that was I just kind of threw myself in there and had the opportunity to really learn really quickly, how to get students' attention, how to talk to students, how to really just treat students like anybody else, right? They want information. They can relate to you. You can have a conversation. And so the complement of being able to be a participant of a program very similar as a high school student, not too many years before I had that position, and then being able to transition on the other side. I think that's one of many full circle moments that I've had an opportunity to experience within CUNY. So coming up as an Upward Bound student at Queens College, to then being a program counselor at John Jay College, working with students. I think Manhattan campuses have the benefit of students from all over the city. I think some of the boroughs tend to have more localized enrollments of students. So working in Manhattan, I had students from the Bronx, from Brooklyn, from Queens, um, which was helpful to learn about how different high schools are working, what goes in different schools. Um, and it was that experience sort of propelled me into this world of higher ed, which I knew nothing about. I knew I had counselors who had worked with me. I knew I had advisors who worked with me. But this term of higher ed, and how to exist in that space to work with students, was still pretty new. I was working with a student on navigating college websites because they're kind of tricky. They were a lot trickier 15 years ago, and it was harder to find information. So I was showing, I pulled up CUNY because we were at John Jay. In alphabetical order, Baruch is first. And so we looked at Baruch, and we were looking at programs. And I happened to look at the graduate programs, and I'm showing students sort of how to navigate, how to find information. And I'm reading the description for this higher ed program. And I'm like, that actually sounds like something I would really like to do. So that is purely and simple how I found out about this program. It was not like a word of mouth. It wasn't posted anywhere. I found it by working with a high school junior on navigating college websites. And right after that, said, this is exactly what I need to do, and applied. And then sort of that was the jump start to my career here.
That's awesome. I immediately just thought about but I'll kind of return to like this point a little bit later as well. But before we had started the program, we were all talking about like how none of us expected to end up in higher education, and here we are. And kind of just connecting the dots of like how much more concentrated our network is. Like I think that's wonderful. So thank you for bringing that up as well. So Ivan, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Sam. So my initial experience was actually with as a student. I'm what people call a CUNY lifer, a CUNY student, and then eventually moved on to kind of the professionals.
Oh, let's see. Oh no, did we lose him? 1 second. Let's see. All right, so while we wait for Ivan to reconnect here, Wynter, so yeah, just going back to quickly about the connection that you were seeing from like high school students to, to like helping them navigate just helping them navigate the process there. What were you finding was the most complicated thing for students to navigate in that transition from high school to college? And does that kind of play into how you interact with students at honors program?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I like the space of being with high school students and like pre-college, like getting ready for college. As I said, I identify as a first generation student. My family didn't have a whole lot of information about what college meant and options and financing, and we relied heavily on, in my instance, Upward Bound and other similar programs to give us that information. So as I'm learning, my younger sister's learning, my mother's learning, we're kind of going on this journey together. Um, while I was working with Talent Search, I had a student who had gotten into an EOP program at a SUNY school upstate. He was excited. He did have a lot of responsibilities at home, and he had 5 younger sisters, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For students, for those of you who are familiar with a program like EOP, there's a summer component. So the student
Yes.
was away for the summer, and he was playing like intramural football or something and injured his ankle and was on crutches. And I remember email, so emailing and sort of checking in, and no one really checked their emails back then as well either, not as frequently as students do now. And I happened to call, and I got mom on the phone, and mom had told me by the time I had heard that he had been injured, he was home. He left and came back, and I remember thinking, we're working with students, or I was working with students on this pre-college, this college going culture, this being prepared for college. And the student just sort of came home. I called and spoke and said, like, what happened? And he's just like, well, that was enough to just sort of like the last straw that broke the camel's back. He didn't start classes, he just came back. And it was more or less in that moment that I recognized that I appreciate pre-college advising and assistance. But if we're working with students to get to college and they don't actually get there, or they're not retained, and they're not having the positive experiences, they're not seeing folks that look like them, they're not seeing folks represent what they think is important, um, then we're not doing as much as we possibly can. So so between that and finding the program at Baruch, I said, well, this is something I can focus on, to work with students as they're coming here. I still have the opportunity to recruit, so I'm still working with high school students. There are some programs at Baruch that work with pre-college students that I have an opportunity to work with and counsel and give workshops and such. But I found that I wanted the opportunity to work more closely with students who were already at college and getting through the complicatedness that is higher education, that has so many confounding factors that have nothing to do with academics. Students who don't complete, it's not just because they can't handle the coursework. And so um, that is where I find myself today. And I see Ivan is back, so I'll leave it there.
No worries, Ivan. We saved the day. We were continuing the how do we find ourselves in higher ed and all that stuff. But no, we would love to hear from you. Tell us how you got started at CUNY. Again, from like you're a CUNY lifer, that sort of stuff. And like so as you've gone through the different campuses and your different roles, how has that evolved? And thank you,
Sure.
Wynter.
Thanks, Wynter. Apologies, folks. Goodness technologies. So my initial experience was as a student and as an undergraduate student. In fact, I started at Brooklyn College as a freshman student. Unfortunately, a week into my first semester as a college student, 9/11 happened. I still very much remember the day. I was actually on my way to a psychology 101 class at Brooklyn College. So it was quite a traumatic experience. And I at that time didn't really feel like I belonged in college. And but I still wanted to kind of stay in college and pursue a college degree. And I actually, after one semester at Brooklyn College, transferred to College of Staten Island. I just needed a new environment, a brand new start. And I eventually graduated from CSI with a degree in sociology and anthropology. Very uncertain in terms of how I got to sociology and anthropology because I was a classically trained pianist and I was going to go to Brooklyn College to go and attend a music conservatory there and be a pianist. But when I moved over to College of Staten Island, I was still thinking about pursuing music, and then the music faculty really wanted me to kind of, remain there and pursue a degree in music. And I eventually decided not to do that. Actually, a very scary conversation that I had to have with my father because, he paid for 16 years of piano lessons. But eventually, with the guidance of, folks at CSI, speaking with, counselors, advisors, eventually I ended up, majoring in sociology and anthropology. And I was one of those folks who just stayed on campus, one, because I lived in Brooklyn at the time. So it was a very, very long commute. So I didn't really want to go back and forth to go to classes. So I actually was very involved. As an undergraduate student, I worked in research labs in psychology. I worked in two different research in psychology, one in psycholinguistics and another one in gender and sexuality. And then also worked in new student orientation. So, for those of us who study, Vincent Tinto probably understand this whole concept of academic and social integration. And then I still remember when I eventually applied for the ASAP position at CSI as the director, the Dean of Science and Technology actually looked at my resume and sat across from me and basically said that your resume is basically the perfect example of academic and social integration. And, look at you. Now you are looking to become the director of our ASAP program. But through my experiences at CSI, even working in new student orientation, that's kind of how I got bitten by the higher ed bug, working with advisors, with admissions counselors. And eventually that's how I got my very first professional role in recruitment admissions. And it's so funny that Wynter kind of talked about, her kind of initial experience in higher ed and, kind of also related to recruitment. So I started as the recruitment inquiry manager, and that was just a fancy title of basically saying that you have to respond to all of the inquiries coming into the college. Whenever people ask about programs, policies, and CSI is a very unique institution as the only public institution on the island. So it's a comprehensive institution associate all the way through doctoral programs. And at that time, when I was in admissions, that was when CSI was launching its very first clinical doctoral program in physical therapy. So I kind of had an opportunity to kind of work with prospective students at all levels, associate, baccalaureate, graduate, postgraduates, and doctoral level. I still remember one time that when I was going to class at Baruch, I took the Staten Island ferry, and one person on the ferry actually asked me, "Hey, do you work at College of Staten Island?" And then we had a whole chat about, the whole recruitment process. So hopefully that person eventually applied and attended CSI. But how I was introduced to the higher ed program at Baruch. So when I started working in admissions, the deputy director of admissions, Emmanuel Esperance, was a graduate of the program. The director of admissions at the time, Mary Beth Riley, was a graduate of the program. They both, again, also have moved on to do, great things. Mary Beth Riley is actually an executive director of enrollment management at a community college in New Jersey, and Manny is now the director of recruitment admissions at CSI. So as you can kind of see that, a lot of the alums, in the program have moved on to do greater and better things. So I was introduced to the higher ed program when I started working there. And, that was kind of when I kind of figured that, this is a very, very good field to be in. And, along the way, when I was doing my undergraduate work, I knew that I wanted to be in education, but I just didn't know what in education I really wanted to do. But, it was a good experience kind of working with, these amazing books. And, I will share that, I consider myself very lucky to have had a lot of great mentors along the way, many of whom, are still in CUNY, and I still consider them great mentors and friends, and even today. So, and, applied to the program. And I think at that time, and I'm going to share, I applied to the program back in 2004, 2005. So I graduated from the program in 2007. So, don't do your math now in terms of how old I am. But I have been in CUNY for almost 20 years as a higher education administrator. So from there, from recruitment admissions, working in recruitment was very exhausting. Wynter could probably attest to that. And we just go into different schools. And I was the only person living outside of Staten Island. So I was on Long Island, Queens, Brooklyn, you name it. So anywhere outside of Staten Island was kind of my recruitment responsibility. So it got a little bit exhausting, and I ended up kind of moving into an advising role at Queen's College and, coordinating transfer advising. And then, over the years, with increasing responsibilities, and moved up to assistant director and then eventually associate director. And as I mentioned earlier, managing transfer advising. And sort of along the way, my director at the time, who is still the director of advising at Queen's College, kind of took me under her wings. And, I was able to get involved in so many different initiatives and projects. And, for folks who might be familiar with CUNY Pathways, back in 2013, might know that it was a very, very complicated times in CUNY. But it was mainly a transfer initiative. So that kind of felt under my purview. So that was a very good experience. And I really owe a lot to Queen's College in terms of opening many doors for me, academically and professionally. And, certainly the higher ed program at Baruch, kind of led me to, pursuing doctoral studies as well, eventually at Northeastern. A professor by the name of Christine Shakespeare. It was a class on international higher education reform. It's one of those kind of, topical courses that you could take as an elective. So she was actually the one who encouraged me at the end of the class, and she sat me down and asked me, "So what's next, Ivan? What are you gonna do?" So and so she was actually the one who encouraged me to pursue doctoral studies. And after Queen's College, and I got this opportunity to, apply to become the founding director at CSI, to launch ASAP. And the rest is kind of history, and expanded, my portfolio to direct A7As, and then now back at Queen's College, where I was, before CSI, to kind of build this transfer-focused program to support transfer students at Queen's.
Great. Thank you so much. So my next question is, so this could be in your personal career trajectory, but I think something we really all want to know is, like, what are the sort of changes that you've seen at CUNY throughout your careers? And I think, I think there's no tiptoeing around it. There's the bureaucracy of CUNY. Is there, an example where you've successfully navigated through a process, and what kind of support did you see having?
Yeah, that question. Public institutions are very bureaucratic, just to begin with. So that's just like the precursor. So I'll start off with what have I seen change? One thing that stands out to me that has changed over the years is, I remember being in high school, and I lived in Queens, so I went to high school in Queens, and thinking for school, like, if you wanted to do business, then you went to Baruch. If you were interested in anything related to, I don't know, social work, for example. Hunter was that place. And I think we had kind of like stratified the different campuses and kind of did not pay attention to all that they have to offer. So looking at a higher ed program, for example, that exists at Baruch, which is known as the business school. We're talking a lot about Queens. Queens and Lehman just recently opened their own business schools last year. They are not, Baruch is not the only place to get an accounting degree in the CUNY network or in the city. So I did not know all of those things 15 years ago as I'm talking to students about options. And I still think probably a lot of counselors are not aware of those things. Like this, if that's what you want, this is where you have to go. Not taking into account that there's other places that have other things that are growing. So Queens is putting a lot of resources into growing that school of business, for example. All the teachers don't have to be from Queens College or from Hunter College, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like, again, going back to that recruitment piece, I find as talking about CUNY with colleagues and such, there's so many opportunities, and I think we're doing a better job of making sure that prospective students, staff who've been here, CUNY lifers who don't know, are doing a better job of creating that message that there's lots of different opportunities around the network. I'm going back to the business at Baruch. We do so much more than that. Our valedictorian this year is a journalism major and has won lots of awards for her poetry. Baruch does more than graduate, accountants and finance majors, which is great. But I think just sort of the diversity of thought that exists on different CUNY campuses is something that I've seen over the last 10 years or so be amplified. And I hope folks are taking better attention, that's showing that there's so many things that you can do around the CUNYverse. I know that's not quite probably the answer that you're looking for, but that was the first thing that came to mind of how things have changed. So I'll stop there and then come back to the bureaucratic navigation around CUNY.
What has changed over the years? Well, I mean, for one thing, technologies. I still remember as a student, probably folks don't know what eSIMs is. Winter's like, and obviously now we have CUNY first, and obviously the implementation of CUNY was quite a journey. So technology most definitely, and certainly, over the last, 2-3 years with the pandemic, I think we have seen quite a bit in terms of the evolution of the use of technologies in sort of what we do in higher education, whether it's, within the classroom and outside the classroom, and certainly for those of us who are, working in student-facing areas, and how we're kind of utilizing technologies to support our students. I have to say that, just reflecting on my experience in CUNY overall as a student, and then eventually as an higher education administrator, and truth be told, as a student, I was not aware of all of the programs and initiatives that now we are made so aware of, like, ASAP, what an amazing idea now is, replicated in so many different states across the country. But one thing that I have noticed over the last, I think, decade is the fact that now we are more intentional at looking at student outcomes as opposed to just output. Like, instead of just, reporting out what we have done, now we're looking at what we have done, and as a result, what are the student outcomes? And I think that's also very important in terms of, public accountability. So that is definitely one of the things that I noticed, over the last couple of years. And with everything that's happening right now, the fiscal crisis in the city and the state budget, and now I know that folks asked about, vacancies in CUNY, are we hiring, are we not? And, everything kind of goes back to, accountability. Now it's, fiscal accountability, and whether, is this position really needed? Do you have the data to back it up? So everything is kind of data driven, data guided. So, and of course, having worked in ASAP for almost a decade, I work with data on a daily basis, and I am sort of, almost trained to kind of make sure that every decision that I make, well, most of my decisions, not every single decision, most of my decisions are made based on data. So But in terms of navigating, the complexity of the CUNYverse, I mean, persistence, good relationship, baked goods, very important, baked goods. But that kind of ties to, building good relationship with colleagues as well. And the fact that we are such a big network. Even though that I work at Queen's College, I have so many wonderful colleagues at the other campuses as well. So getting feedback and insights from colleagues is always a good thing. So, I sort of, not to, throw shades at, independent colleges, but I certainly cannot imagine kind of working at an independent college and, going to another college and, kind of sharing, this is my challenge. Do you have any feedback for me? But when I talk to my CUNY colleagues, it's almost like we're speaking in the same language, and the ability to kind of provide feedback and insights and consolation as well. Sometimes we just need to vent a little bit. So persistence, good relationship, and baked goods. And you just sometimes have to laugh at the challenges and the bureaucracy of CUNY. You just have to.
And Wynter, did you want to pick up on that part?
Sure. I love the baked goods part. And I think relationship building is such an important piece. So like as Ivan is discussing, working in different places, talking with different people, it's very easy to be siloed if you want to be. It's very possible to do your job without a lot of input from different offices or different folks. I don't know if that means you're doing your job well, but it's possible to get along with that. That was never something that I wanted or liked. Just by nature of being a part of, so Ivan's a part of ASAP, an ACE, there's networks on all the campuses, is being a part of honors on different campuses. It's something that we have kind of like built-in cohorts of folks who are doing similar work on different campuses. And have a network to look at, and that's great. And I also wanted to add in the data piece. I don't think a lot of decisions were data driven in the past, and that's just across the board. Data analytics, that's a new track that we have here at Baruch that students are very much interested in, and I think all over the place using data to inform decisions is sort of taken off everywhere, including our department. So surveys and what's going on with students, how are they liking what we're doing? How can we adjust? Are we doing things that's really impactful while they're here? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely that. The piece about bureaucracy, I would say, maybe not just the pandemic, but I would say in the last 5, 7 years, I think offices have been, and maybe more so since the pandemic, it used to be if there was a policy, that's what it is, that's how it's been done, that's it. I think colleagues are more open to being, I don't know if flexible is the right word, but recognizing that we are here to support student success, and some things are just not student friendly. So whether it's a policy that I'm going to use an example that I've dealt with recently. My students receive a full tuition scholarship, and it's written as 8 consecutive semesters. And I understand why that makes sense from a financial standpoint, but if there is an extenuating circumstance of sorts, being able to talk to colleagues in different offices, whether that's financial aid, whether that's in our provost office, to see, like, is there something that we can do? I know this is the policy, but our students have lives, our students have a wide range of responsibilities. Is there something we can do that can be a bit more student friendly? And I've been finding more recently that it's not always a no. It's not like I can't even ask. That's not even a possibility. Um, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things that we've done, but I think students' mental health, their well-being, students being able to be honest about how they're feeling, especially with the pressures of school. And students in my program have a GPA requirement, so some of that pressure can be a lot for an emerging adult, an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, and that's a reason to rethink what we're doing. It's students are not machines. As much as we might think that they are, they just can't crank out 15 credits each semester and graduate in 4 years and add to our graduation rates the way that we want them to. They are people underneath. So I found with the bureaucracy that sometimes if we're centering students in the conversation and their mental and physical, emotional well-being at the center of what we're doing and why we're asking for certain things or why we're trying to do certain things, that we've had some success with navigating some policies that in the past were just like, this is what it is. Yes. And I think that's in a lot of different places. People are recognizing that mental, emotional, physical well-being and health are important, and we should spend more time and attention talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you two so much for your wonderful answers and kind of giving the insight. I think a lot of us here, like whether we're working at CUNY or not, we're very much like resonating with all these feelings. So I think it was wonderful to have that reassurance that this is a united front for CUNY, and then it's also a united front for higher education as a whole. So at this time, I'm going to want to open it up to questions from the audience and from our participants here. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I can certainly read any aloud, or feel free to unmute, turn on your cameras, raise your hand, anything along the lines of that. So yeah. And no need to be shy. Oh, Hannah, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you for organizing. Thank you to the speakers. Great anecdotes. I think even for those, for people who may be staying in their job rather than looking to move, just good to hear these approaches. But I was wondering if anyone has like on the ground info about what's going on with hiring, if it's really different on a case by case level, like there's the hiring freeze, but I know in my own department, we still have managed to hire people, but they're postings that I just see lasting forever. And, like is there a lot of hiring going on right now? Or what are some insights about that?
That is a good question.
That's a very good question, Wynter. I mean, I would like to have some concrete answers as well. And I was just sharing with Sam earlier before everybody kind of jumped onto the call that I have searches right now that are still on hold. I was supposed to launch 3 searches in the beginning of February, and those were all put on hold at the moment. So at the moment, as I'm building this program and recruiting a new cohort, I'm still kind of doing a 4-person job at the moment. I'm not here to complain, but that's just the sad reality. But as I understand it, if the jobs get posted on the CUNY website, they are most likely funded and they are sort of good to go. And as I understand it, the colleges are now kind of bearing the responsibilities of making sure that those positions are appropriate, and they should be funded, and they should be a sort of this green light to move ahead with searches and hiring.
I will say to our sadness, in my team, we've lost 2 of our staff members recently to other positions within CUNY. One was much slower than the other, so I think the other one was also like in February-ish. So it was like a start-stop situation, but it's my understanding that has now continued on. And they both are looking in CUNY, so they were hired in CUNY, which is great. So we're hoping that then the hiring part is not so complicated because they were hired and they are on their way to their new roles. But and I'll make sure that I send out to Suzanne. We will have 2 positions open in my office very soon. So we'll be looking for some advisors as well. It sounds like Ivan's looking for some ACE advisors as well for students who might be interested in working with students at the undergraduate level. So 2 of my team members are recently departed. One is departed and one is on their way out to a position in CUNY. So it is moving. I know VRB definitely slowed things down, and I think they were working differently on different campuses with the speed. But yes, searches are definitely ongoing. Yeah, I think CUNY was always a little bit slow with some positions. Just for whatever reason. Right, exactly. Even when they were posted, but it is definitely moving. It is definitely moving.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I can ask about just as far as both of you. Sorry, I don't know why this is happening. Okay. Moving up in CUNY, can you talk about like your transitions to other roles and how you found that you were ready to make that move? In my experience, CUNY is not good at promoting people. There's that, once I heard this expression, in order to grow, you have to go. I was like, oh, that was relevant for me in CUNY, and I've worked at 3 different CUNYs. But I'm wondering if you could talk about like your own experiences as you've changed roles, and like, how did you know and how did you navigate that process? For those people who might feel like they're kind of stuck. And I, like Sam and I work with people on their career goals, and they get like stuck at this level because people stay in their jobs for a long time in CUNY, especially at the higher levels. Any comments on that?
And there's also less of them as you're looking as you're looking as a hierarchy, there's less of them, less of those opportunities. So I found it, I've heard horror stories from colleagues who in the program, outside the program, who were like really frustrated where they were. So as they're searching, they're just ready to go and might just take the first thing that is thrown at them. For me personally, it's been helpful that each time it was time to make a move or whatnot, I was really okay where I was and then just wanted to try to see what other opportunities might be available. So you never know when something's going to show up. When you're ready for it, it may not be there. So you kind of have to grab the opportunity when you see it. So for me, each time, I don't think I was really ready to go. It's just I happened to see something and went forward. I had a director in the past who told me, any interview is an opportunity. So whether it turns into something or not, the chance to sit across from folks and answer questions and think more about yourself and what your next steps are is an opportunity worth taking. So for me, it wasn't so much I was ready to go. It was more of I saw something that looked interesting and looked like something that was progressing on something that I've already been doing and going for it and being successful with that. I find, like I said, not wanting to look and just be like frustrated where I'm at or be disappointed or feel like I have to go and just grab something, but to take something that really fit what I thought might be a really great next step to get me to something else. And for me, that's meant moving around the city in different boroughs, similar to Ivan, sometimes I had to travel for those opportunities. So even going to the Bronx, for example, I lived in Queens and I went to the Bronx every day, which was not bad. I had students who did the same thing. We'd ride the train together. But, just sort of, and not everyone has that opportunity. That was years ago. I was out of college. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities at home. I could take a 2-hour commute in the morning and a 2-hour commute back, which is not something I can do now. So yeah, as Suzanne just mentioned, that the opportunities are sometimes few and far between. When you see it, to just go and then get some support from people around you, whether that's mentors or Sam and Suzanne. Yeah.
And very similar to what sort of Wynter said, and I guess, I'm fortunate to not have been in a situation where I felt like I needed to leave or I needed to go. And, when I was at Queen's College and as I was given more responsibilities, and fortunately I had a great mentor who was willing to fight for reclassification, and I was promoted, twice within the institution. And then eventually, and I did mention earlier, during the intro section that, in 2015 actually, I was recognized by the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students for my transfer work at Queen's College. So during the annual convening, I was actually recognized at the award ceremony. And at the end of the award ceremony, the vice president for enrollment management at CSI was actually in the audience. And she was the one who came from behind, hugged me, and we connected. And that was when I found out about the ASAP position. At that time, as the associate director for transfer advising at Queen's College, I had no intention of leaving Queen's. I had no intention sort of to, leave that particular position. So the opportunity kind of came to me. So, I was asked, so what are you going to be doing, at Queen's College, in 5 years? Hey, there's a position at CSI that's going to be opening up. If you're interested, have a look. If you're interested, apply. I'm not on the search committee, but I just want to make sure that you are aware that there's an opportunity at CSI. And, around that time, I was toying with that idea, and I thought that it would be a great learning experience for me. And eventually I applied, got the job, and I have to say that it was probably one of the best decisions that I made. My boss at the time, the director of advising, was very sad that I was going. But at the same time, she was very, very happy for me. But I think that's what a great mentor does. They might be sad for you because they might not be seeing you every single day and working alongside you. But at the same time, happy that you are going to have this great opportunity for your personal and professional growth. And, going back to Suzanne's question, like, at what point do you think that it's time to go? And I think for me, it's more like, when you feel like you're kind of in a routine and you're no longer learning brand new stuff, and you feel like you've just been doing kind of the same thing over and over again, then, it's really, time to really think about, what opportunities might be out there for you to learn. And one thing that's important is that it's not necessarily looking to advance professionally in terms of professional titles. And I think, that's very important. For me, even though that I'm now, founding director of ACE, very similar to the work that I did at CSI, it's a completely new environment and I'm doing transfer focused work. So, something's very similar functionally, but completely different in terms of the areas of responsibilities. So, and very similar to folks asking me, questions once I finished my doctorate about 5-6 years ago. Like, so are you looking to become a dean? Are you going to be an assistant provost? At the moment, that's not really in the cards for me. The reason why I wanted to pursue a doctorate was only to become a better practitioner, a better leader for myself. So, so instead of, thinking that, I'm going to have to chase after titles, I just want to chase after, the growth that, I am going to be able to kind of gain by kind of, moving around. And if you look at my resume, you kind of see that I have kind of an 8-year timeline. So in each of the institutions, I kind of have this 8-year, and when 8 years is up, that's where I kind of like, maybe I should look at other learning opportunities. So.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? If anyone is unable to unmute, more than happy to have you enter them in the chat, and then happy to read them out loud here. Let's see.
I just wanted to mention, Ivan, I put Laura is awesome. You worked with Laura Silverman, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When I was at Queen, she's great.
Awesome. Oops.
I will just mention that the names, people that are in the program with you. So the networking that Ivan just mentioned, careers, jobs, as things become available. Same things we tell our students as they're looking for internships. You have to network there's a bunch of internships that are not actually posted or that are talked about unofficially off the record. I know jobs work in the exact same way. Each position I've had for the last couple of years, since it's been in the same family, I've known all of the people that are in those spaces. And I think making it a point not to silo myself off, to make sure that I'm talking with folks, collaborating with folks. I'm actually in the midst of trying to put together an honors network across CUNY, which doesn't exist. So we'll have a first meeting next month, just trying to meet people, look at best practices, as Ivan just mentioned, how to be a better practitioner yourself, and being diligent in trying to find that information. Yeah. And I found like there's a void with honors networks. Macaulay has a network, but there are a lot of honors programs across the system that are not necessarily talking to each other. So that's something I wanted to spend some more time trying to figure out how to navigate. And transferability, as you mentioned as well, students who might want to transfer from one program to another.
Right. Absolutely. Well, yeah. So speaking of networking, Suzanne just put in the chat the higher education HEA happy hour that's happening on June 20th this year. So absolutely would love to see you all there. I'm gonna just ask a follow-up question that actually came up in the registration report. Let me see if I can find it here. What what advice would you give someone who's looking to, so this is kind of actually goes into like the silos. What advice would you give someone looking to transition into a niche area of higher ed? Whether it be, let's say, transfer services, or if they're going into more like community engagement, anything like that. And like, how do you work around those silos in a sense?
So, go ahead, Ivan.
Go ahead, Wynter.
So the question is, how do you navigate going into an area that's just very tiny? Like, how do you get to like learn more about what's going on in those areas? I would think of honors as very niche, very specific on a campus. And one way, so again, that's something that I'm also trying to figure out because it means different things on different campuses. It's not administered the same. There's such a wide range of what that means. So, like for us, when we talk about transfers, that's very different from what Ivan was talking about with transfer students coming in. And so I think those networks aren't in play. So it is difficult. I actually went through every website in CUNY, found anyone related to anything honors related, created a list, reached out to like it's the whole thing because it doesn't exist like that infrastructure of how to learn how to do more. If you're interested in something niche, barring from trying to think folks that where I'm at who are interested in something honors related, figuring out a way to maybe create something that would be adjacent where you are. So high achieving, for example, means lots of different things in different places. Baruch means one thing, BMCC means something else. And trying to lean into that a little bit, whether that's creating opportunities in your current role, if you're in higher ed, trying to figure out if there's a way to incorporate that. I mean, no one wants to do a lot of extra work, but there are ways to think creatively about working with colleagues in different places. So if there's something, I think, niche, and you mentioned transfer, and then even transfer, again, we have transfer programs. SEEK has, a transfer process. The general campus has a transfer process. I find there is a way to sit down and really think about how you can brainstorm working with colleagues across your department and another one to learn more about what it takes in that space. Yeah, if you wanted to add to that, Ivan, that's what came to mind.
Yeah, sure. So, and I think, Wynter kind of mentioned that, niche area is kind of, it all depends on how you interpret that, right? And I think often folks, once you kind of get into the field, you start working in that particular area, you almost feel like you are kind of stuck. You have to remain in that area. So for example, for someone who started working in recruitment admissions, it's almost like, am I going to be able to go into a different area as I advance professionally? I always encourage people to kind of explore, and the fact that now technologies are great and you can reach out to folks, not even just within CUNY, but outside of CUNY as well. So, and I feel like most of the higher education folks are very open to talking to people in general. They're just, a very friendly bunch. But I think ultimately, folks have to really start thinking about, systemically in terms of your role within the field of higher education. And, for example, when I transitioned from recruitment and admissions into an advising role, I started really thinking about my role in recruitment and admissions, specifically the transfer area. What value and what skills and what knowledge can I bring into this advising role from my days and experience in the missions. So, and I would say that, even reflecting on my current role right now in relation to all of the experiences that I have had, my current role right now really encapsulates all of the things I have done throughout my higher education journey. So I think, folks have to really think about, instead of, functions in higher education administration, they also really think about kind of systemically your role and how your skills will kind of transfer from one area to another. And I'm sure, for you, Sam and Suzanne, in career services and career development, you're always talking to folks about, building your competencies and, thinking how all those things will kind of translate from one to another. So
Yeah, absolutely. I like the way of thinking. Yeah, like we're always promoting like transferable skills, and I think that like when I hear silos, I think this might be a career service thing. Like I immediately think transferable skills. Like come on, like that's like the way to get out and whatnot. I did get a question in the chat. And this will be our last question for the session. In your experience, either being on either side of an interview, how should someone go through an interview knowing that they might be against an internal hire?
Can you ask that question one more time?
So this question is coming from someone who is an interviewee. What are some tips going through an interview at CUNY if they know that they're going to be going up against an internal hire? And I'm asking, I guess, any tips that you have, being on either side of that situation. Yeah.
never be fearful of going into an interview, knowing that there might be internal candidates. I have seen, and I have done so many searches where we hired external candidates instead of internal candidates.
Wow.
You just have to be very confident. And campus cultures in terms of, hiring from within. And I think it kind of goes back to our kind of initial discussion in terms of promotion from within. Sometimes instead of promoting from within, they will launch a search and then you might have internal candidates. But again, that's just the name of the game in terms of job searches, and right. So, I will say never be fearful of going into a search or interview process knowing that there might be internal candidates. You just might be a better fit for them for whatever that they're looking for. So
just to add on really quickly, I've been on both ends of that. I've been up against a internal candidate and was successful, and I've been up against internal candidates and have not been successful. And I think, as Ivan just mentioned, it can go either way. With knowing what this office is looking for, I recognize the value in keeping internal talent close by. That there is just a range of training that is not needed if you have an internal candidate. But an external candidate can also bring us a perspective from wherever they are to have you revisit how things are working and such. So being on both ends of that, whether that's being the interviewee or being the interviewer, I've been both and I've seen both. So the confidence is an important piece, just as you would prepare for anything else. You don't want an internal candidate to think they have it in the bag and then not prepare the same way that they would, and then not be successful in that process. So I think that the confidence piece goes a long way in the preparation, just as you would for anything else. You're going against someone else, but they have to also perform. So it's to your benefit to just concentrate on what you have control over. Same thing we tell our students, you have no control over what's happening in that second interview. All you can control is what you bring to yours and how you interact with the people on the other end of that table or screen. And that's it. And focus your time and energy on that.
Great. Thank you. That's actually really refreshing to hear. I know that I haven't been on any search committees before, but I know being in the interviewee seat, that is actually really refreshing here. So thank you both for giving that insight. For prospective CUNY candidates, or any job candidates as well. We are a little bit past the hour, so everyone here, thank you so much for joining us today. If everyone can hear, just help me give a round of applause to our two alumni speakers, Wynter and Ivan. Thank you so much for joining us today. A follow-up email will be sent out with the recording, along with ways to connect with Wynter and Ivan. Everyone, please have a great rest of your week. And we look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully at the Higher Ed Happy Hour. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Bye. Take care.